London looks like steel in winter. The pavement is slick, the sky is flat, and the press pen outside the High Court has the feeling of a queue for a concert that never starts. Lenses tilt up, then down, then up again, waiting for a single face that can turn an ordinary weekday into a headline. When the black car arrives, the clicking begins before the door opens. Prince Harry steps out in a suit, not a uniform. No balcony, no parade. Just a man walking toward a building where stories are tested against evidence. In January 2026, he and several other public figures are in a civil case against Associated Newspapers, the publisher of the Daily Mail. They allege unlawful information gathering and serious invasions of privacy over many years. The publisher denies wrongdoing. The details are what make the moment feel bigger than celebrity drama. Reuters reported that the claimants alleged long-running misconduct including phone hacking, bugging, and the use of deception to obtain private information, and that Associated Newspapers rejects those allegations. Reuters also noted that the group of claimants includes figures such as Elton John, and that Harry's lawyer argued the prince was especially valuable to tabloids, making him a repeated target. Reuters framed the case as part of a broader pattern, Harry's public campaign against media intrusion, rooted in the trauma of losing his mother amid intense press attention. It is why the opening scene matters. This isn't only about money or reputation. It is about the fear that attention can cross into harm, and about a person trying to draw a line on a page that never stops being written. For viewers, this is the hook because it reverses the expected role. Royals are usually filmed inside cathedrals, not courtrooms. They're presented as symbols of stability, not as claimants fighting intrusion. Yet Harry's biography makes one thing clear. He has spent most of his life with strangers writing his story for profit, and at some point he decided he wanted to contest the price. This isn't about asking the audience to pick a side in a legal battle. It's about framing a human question that feels modern and urgent. When attention is an industry, who protects the person at its center? Harry's case forces that question into the open, but it didn't begin in 2026. It began long before he had words like privacy and consent. A documentary voice can pause here and remind the audience of the contrast. The court cares about specific claims, dates, and proof, while the internet cares about impressions. In the same week, people will argue about morality, loyalty, and who is right, even though those questions aren't the legal issue. That split is part of Harry's life story. His reality is often a file folder. The public version is often a meme. The tension between those two versions, evidence versus narrative, is the engine of this biography. To understand the courtroom scene, we rewind to the first flashbulbs, when he was small enough to hide behind a leg and famous enough that hiding never worked. The camera finds archival footage, a red-haired boy in a neat coat, the world smiling at him as if he belongs to everyone, and the narration asks what a child learns when every step is watched. Prince Harry was born Henry, Charles Albert David, on September 15, 1984, in London, the younger son of Charles and Diana, Princess of Wales. From the beginning, his life split into two versions. Inside the family, he was simply Harry, a child with jokes, fears, and ordinary moods. Outside, he was an image, captured, captioned, and circulated as proof of continuity. He grew up alongside his older brother William in a world where tradition is the air you breathe. The rules are everywhere: how to speak, how to stand, how to remain calm while people stare. For a child, that calm can look like strength, but it can also feel like a mask you wear too early, a performance you learn before you know who you are. His mother, Diana, tried to widen the walls around her sons. She was known for pushing them toward experiences that felt less ceremonial and more real, as if she understood that a sheltered childhood can become a trapped adulthood. In photos, Harry often looks bright and playful, the younger one who turns toward the camera with a grin. But even the happiest frames carry a signature detail, the presence of protection, the awareness of an audience. Then the childhood story ends in a way that never stops echoing. In 1997, Diana dies in a car crash after being pursued by photographers. Harry is 12. There is no quiet mourning. There is a public funeral, watched worldwide, where two boys walk behind their mother's coffin. That image becomes a permanent reference point for how people interpret Harry's choices, because it connects fame to danger and grief to spectacle. From there, Harry grows up under a double pressure. He is expected to represent the monarchy, and he is also expected to be entertainment. The first pressure comes with training, speeches, and etiquette. The second comes with headlines that turn adolescence into a storyline. The audience learns to recognize his face before they know his voice, and that imbalance shapes the rest of his life. If part 1 is the courtroom, part 2 is the origin. A boy learns early that privacy is not guaranteed and that the world can feel entitled to the worst day of your life. A phrase follows Harry into adulthood: the heir and the spare. One son is trained to inherit the crown, the other becomes the backup. It sounds old-fashioned until you see how it functions like a script. The heir is prepared to be steady and silent. The spare is allowed to be vivid, sometimes even encouraged to be colourful, because colour sells and the institution can survive it. Harry was educated at Eton College, then moved through early adulthood with a public identity that felt less like a person and more like a headline category. The tabloid version of him became familiar: the party prince, the reckless younger brother, the troublemaker. Some moments were real, some were exaggerated, and many were framed to fit a simple narrative that could be repeated forever. In documentary terms, this is the era where the outside world edits him, cutting out nuance, keeping only what shocks or amuses. At the same time, his official life kept moving. He carried out public duties, appeared at formal events, and stood in national moments where the monarchy performs continuity. That contrast, public duty versus tabloid noise, created a confusing image. A man expected to represent stability while being portrayed as unstable. Here's the tension the documentary leans into. Harry can't simply stop being famous. He can only decide what kind of famous he will be. For years, the attention comes with no choice. Then, slowly, choice becomes the plot. What does he keep? What does he reject? What does he turn into purpose? The problem with a tabloid character is that it doesn't grow, it repeats. So as Harry matured, the gap between his lived experience and the version sold to the public widened. The more he felt misunderstood, the more he seemed determined to find an identity that wasn't defined by titles or gossip. Years later, he confronted that editing directly through authorship. His memoir, Spare, was published globally on January 10, 2023. The title is blunt, almost defiant. It suggests that the role itself shaped his psychology, important, visible, yet perpetually secondary. Whether you agree with his perspective or not, the memoir signals a critical shift. Harry is no longer willing to let other people narrate his life without response. Yet, even before the book, he tried another path toward definition, one built on structure, discipline, and service rather than image. He joined the military, hoping the uniform might offer a kind of clarity that royalty never could. In 2005, Harry entered officer training at the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst, and in 2006, he received his commission as an army officer. For him, this wasn't only career choice, it was identity architecture. Military life runs on rules that don't bend for celebrity. You can't wave your way through training, you can't charm your way past exhaustion. You show up, you learn, you endure. Harry served in the British Army, including deployments connected to Afghanistan. The public conversation around his service was complicated: security concerns, debate about risk, and constant attention that followed him into spaces meant for focus and danger. Yet the idea of service mattered. In this chapter, he was not simply representing tradition. He was attempting to earn belonging in a world where titles mean less than competence. For audiences who only knew the tabloid edit, military service reframed him. It suggested seriousness. It hinted at a need to be more than a story. The camera can show archive footage of desert heat, rotor blades, training drills, and the kind of stillness that appears when a person is finally doing something that feels real. Then the larger effect becomes visible. Harry begins speaking about veterans with a tone that doesn't sound borrowed. He talks like someone who has seen how injury changes families, how trauma can follow people home, and how recovery is not a slogan. That credibility becomes the bridge to his next era, turning attention into a tool for healing. The military didn't erase the spotlight, but it changed what he did under it. It moved him from being watched to trying to protect others who had been harmed by war. And that impulse, protection, recovery, rebuilding, becomes the most stable thread in his adult life. In 2014, Harry helped launch the Invictus Games, an international sporting event for wounded, injured, and sick service personnel and veterans. The inaugural games were held in London from September 10th to 14th, 2014. On screen, it looks like sport and ceremony. Underneath, it's rehabilitation and pride, proof that strength can be rebuilt after damage. Invictus matters to this biography because it is a creation rather than an inheritance. It is the rare public project where Harry is not simply a royal doing a royal thing, but a founder shaping a mission. The event also redefines what heroism looks like: not perfection, not silence, survival, adaptation, community. You can imagine the documentary cutting to close-ups, hands tightening prosthetic straps, athletes steadying each other before a start line, a laugh that breaks through nervousness, a medal that means more than a podium. The games give Harry something he rarely had as a young adult, a public environment where attention is attached to effort, not to scandal. Around the same period, Harry also joined other efforts to modernize the royal conversation, especially around mental health. In May 2016, he, Prince William, and Catherine launched the Heads Together campaign to help end stigma and encourage people to speak about mental well-being. This is where the documentary gains depth. Harry is no longer only reacting to being pursued. He is building a public identity around care. Care for veterans, care for emotional recovery, care for the parts of people that don't show up in photographs. It's also the chapter where he learns the power and the limits of the institution. A royal platform can amplify a cause, but it also sets rules about what you can say, how you can say it, and who you can be. As long as Harry remains a working royal, the institution helps frame his story. As he grows older, he begins to push against that frame. Harry married Meghan Markle in 2018, and for a moment it looked like the monarchy had found a new kind of future: global, modern, and emotionally open. But the spotlight intensified. Every appearance became a debate. Every silence became interpretation. In January 2020, Harry and Meghan announced they intended to step back as senior working members of the royal family and pursue a more independent life while continuing service. Buckingham Palace then confirmed a new arrangement. They would step back from royal duties, including official military appointments, and they would no longer receive public funds for royal duties. The palace also said they plan to repay sovereign grant spending for the refurbishment of Frogmore Cottage, and that the new model would take effect in spring 2020. In documentary terms, this is the point of no return. The couple's decision reshapes everything: where they live, what they build, how they are protected, and how they are judged. Some viewers saw liberation, others saw rejection. But the deeper truth is simpler. Harry was choosing authorship again, this time not with a book, but with his life structure. Then, in 2023, Spare arrives as a second declaration of authorship. Published globally on January the 10th, it invites the world to hear his version without palace translation. Some called it honesty, others called it betrayal. Either way, it confirmed that he wasn't trying to disappear. He was trying to control the terms of being seen. And that brings us back to the courthouse steps in 2026. The lawsuit against the Daily Mail publisher is not merely another celebrity conflict. For Harry, it reads like the final form of a lifelong argument, the line between public interest and private pain. Reuters reported that a witness statement quoted by lawyers said it was disturbing to feel that his every move, thought, or feeling could be tracked and monitored just to generate profit. Associated Newspapers denies unlawful conduct. The court will weigh evidence, the public will keep weighing emotion. If you want this episode to land, the ending can't be a verdict prediction. It has to be a portrait. Harry's adulthood is a long attempt to move from being a symbol to being a person, a son grieving in public, a soldier searching for purpose, a founder building Invictus, a husband choosing a new map, and a writer insisting on his own words. The audience may disagree with his choices, but the arc is coherent. He reacts to intrusion by building boundaries. He reacts to pain by building projects. And in that way, the scandal isn't the headlines. It's the price of being watched forever without consent from birth. The closing image is quiet. Not a palace gate, but a courtroom door. Not a prince waving, but a man walking forward with purpose. His biography, at its core, is the story of someone born into a tension, shaped by loss, hardened by scrutiny, softened by service, and still fighting, above all, for ownership of his own story.